it seems to me that like if it's you're making some sort of like a micro kind of analysis, right? I don't think it's illogical. Obviously, if it's a generalized claim, I think it's less statistically relevant. But um, from the way statistical significance works, when you say something statistical significant, you're talking about like a generalized claim. But if someone is making like a micro
Can we
analysis of a
just
certain,
get to the debate?
oh my god, yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, we can just continue where we left last time, right? You were saying that like my view is a post hoc rationalization, right? And then I
Yeah, I
gave
said your view is an accommodation. It's not an explanation. That's what I said last time.
yeah. So um, like I mean, so what is the okay? Before getting to the stuff, like what is the like what are the things that you see in the view that you think that are accommodative, right? Like I don't know before like maybe
Non-trivial or non-novel predictions.
so so is it just the predictions that are making from the view that are the problem, or is it about the like because I think the view talks about the conditions necessary, right? It talks about the before the ethics comes in, it talks about like the conditions necessary for harm. So
Why
I
would they
don't
be necessary?
yeah, because obviously you're talking about the kind of commitments that exist even if there's no moral patient, right? So you're talking about conditions for harm that
Are you saying
exist
that they're conceptually necessary truths? Or in what sense are they necessary?
that are necessary in the sense that um you cannot really actualize or you cannot really talk about harm you cannot talk about harm in a meaningful way if you don't invoke these concepts.
Do you understand that using the term cannot would just be a synonym? To say that X is necessary is just to say that X cannot obtain without that fact being present. So what you just said was non-informative. It's like saying it's necessary in order for you to be a person, it's necessary that you're a human. And then somebody says, "Why is that necessary?" And then they say, "Because you can't be a person unless you're human." That's literally what you're doing right now with your view. Look, let's just get clear on what the modal semantics even are. So you've had all this time to go read and stuff. Presumably, you understand what possible world semantics are when you're invoking terms like necessity, right? Unless you're using it in some non-modal sense that I don't understand what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, in the sense I'm using, the sense I'm using necessary. Yeah, I'm just talking about preconditions, right? I'm not talking.
Preconditions. Look, do you understand? I'm asking you your possible world semantics. So I'm asking you for the semantical schema that you're utilizing to employ these modal operators. Necessity is going to be a modal operator, and it's going to require a language system to like sort of express what's meant by the operators within the formal system. So, as an example, right, possibly P is going to be a modal operator in modal logic, for example, right? Or not P is going to be a negation operator in classical logic, right? So, to say that P is logically necessary is to say that in every possible model which can be evaluated, P will come out as true. Now, is that something that you're saying when you say that it's necessary or not? This is going to be another teaching lesson for this guy, dude. Holy shit.
Oh my god. I mean, under my view, yeah, I would say it's necessary. That would be the view.
I know that you're saying that it's necessary. I'm asking you specifically to illustrate or demonstrate what the modal semantics are of necessity. When you say it's necessary, are you saying that it's nomologically necessary, logically necessary, metaphysically necessary, conceptually necessary, semantically necessary? What do you mean?
I mean, for UCP specifically, I think it's gonna be some sort of metaphysical necessity.
Metaphysically necessary. So you think that in order for it to be intelligible, for me to talk about facts pertaining to value, that it's a condition of metaphysical necessity that an experiencer is present.
Oh,
Is that
sorry.
what you're signing off on?
No, no, no. Sorry. It's not. Wait, wait. Let me think about this. when I'm talking about the UCP, I know you're laughing, dude. Like, I've not even gotten into the
Because it's just funny, like you always in my comment section talking about how I've never cooked you, you always win, and all this kind of stuff. And every time you perform against me, it's like I'm bullying like the special ed kid or something. Like I just feel bad.
Okay, I mean, sure. Okay, first of all, when I talked about metaphysical necessity, I was talking about the condition for harm. But if you're talking about the necessity in the sense that I'm talking for the UCP, I mean I've already posted this on my account before. The UCP is acting as an explanatory role, right? It's acting as an explanatory role before the ethics comes in. So it's going to be some sort of explanatory
I
in
don't
the
think it's
sense
explanatory at all. Like what
it is.
explanatory virtues does the UCP have to make it explanatory?
Well, explanatory. I mean, it talks about like it talks about some sort of like indispensable or conceptual state for psychology and how psychology acts as an explanatory role before the ethics comes in.
How does psychology act as an explanatory role for ethics?
Yeah, I mean, I can get into that if you want, but when we talk about like the psychology, we're just talking about the kind of evaluations, right? So when you look at the way psychology works with my field or the unified psychology, it seems to me that concepts like diachronic ownership, which is how you evaluate whether something or like whether an entity, right, can have some sort of evaluation of a concept or an evaluation of a state. It seems to me that at T1, this particular entity has some sort of evaluation or a mental state at a T2, it has a different mental state. So it seems to me that these particular concepts like harm are diachronic in nature, they are not synchronic. That is why you cannot really say that like something is harmed in the time. There has to be some sort of time difference for you to measure the concept of harm. So UCP just talks about the particular kinds of like it talks about the theoretical or like explanatory framework or the theoretical or commitments for this kind of for these kinds of concepts. So it's just indispensable, right? Like you cannot talk about harm without invoking some sort of concept, like some sort of like psychological evaluation. So that's all what the UCP is trying to say.
Okay, so it seems like what you're saying is that, and like psychology is going to be this kind of like indispensable fact to diachronic identity in the sense that in order for it to be the case that there's going to be some mental subject who persists over time at T1 and T2, that the link there is going to be something which fundamentally is explained in terms of some fact about an experience, which is fine. I understand that's what the thesis is saying. But I mean, first and foremost, there's two different senses of diachronic identity. So you already got that wrong. You're talking about diachronic identity in the sense
I'm
that it's
talking about
mental.
diachronic ownership, not identity.
Diachronic ownership, and by diachronic ownership, presumably you're talking about ownership in the sense that it's mental, correct?
Yeah, but the fact that it's instantiated.
Yeah, that's still consistent with my point. You can have different types of diachronic ownership. You can have diachronic ownership in the sense that you own the same physical body over time. You can also have diachronic ownership in the sense that you own the same psychology over time. That's the first thing. The second thing is you're somehow like placing more importance on one over the other, but the motivation for why you place importance on one over the other is simply based on these already pre-existing like ideas that you have about precisely what is constitutive of harm in the first place, right? So everything that you're saying is not like diffusing the charge of your view being like a just so story. Everything that you're saying is actually like amplifying the charge that your view is a just so story.
So do you think that diachronic ownership is not some sort of fundamental construct when you're analyzing concepts like harm and how this particular kind of concept can be literally reverse engineered from any kind of metaphysical framework? Like when you talk about other kinds of like ethical cases like murder or you're talking about like anesthesia cases or you're talking about dementia cases or any other kind of ethical framework, it seems to me that these kinds of facts exist across the ethical globe. So I don't see how it's a just so story if I can literally points about this how these facts exist, right, without any kind of like external kind of factor, like because I'm not making a judgment, I'm just saying that like
I'm not
before.
disagreeing with that. Like if the claim is just supposed to be merely that in order for us to have like some sameness over time, that there has to be like a diachronic relation which is like sustained over that course of time. Of course, I'm going to agree. That's just constitutive of what it means to be a diachronic identity relation. But that's not the issue. The issue that I'm pointing out is that that doesn't diffuse the like contention that I'm giving you, which is that the view that you're offering up is like if you're going to argue that there's going to be look in the same way that if you have like let's say two people, one is a dualist and one is a physicalist, and the physicalist presents an argument, and one of the premises of the argument is going to be something which like presumes that there's going to be an ontological underdetermination. Any set of reasons they're going to be able to provide for that underdetermination relation is something which is going to already presume the conclusion of their original arguments. In the same way, if you're going to argue that the facts about value are going to be underdetermined, like pre-sentience, any set of reasons that you're going to be able to deliver is something which is going to already presume the conclusion of your view, right? But let's just say that your view was correct. I'm actually going to ask you this question. Like, how exactly do you address the issue, considering that diachronic
Sorry.
identity is going to be understood as a non-transitive
Sorry,
relation?
sorry, can you repeat that well?
Yeah, I said barring everything that I just said, like let's just assume that everything that I just said is false. Let's just say I give you the benefit of the doubt and everything that I'm saying is false and everything that you're saying is true. This brings me to the question of how you address the issue with like if according to like an ordinary conception of diachronic identity, it's going to be understood as a non-transitive relation, right? So how exactly do you get around the issue? See, because it seems like you're fixing the facts about diachronic identity. You're fixing them in terms of psychological facts. So how do you deal with the fact that under that notion, personal identity actually entails the possibility of a diachronic violation of the relation between the mental subject and its later self?
I mean that's a lot to parse, but like basically you're just asking that like um you're just asking for some sort of like non-transitive relation, right? Or some sort of relation that
No,
can
I'm not asking you for a non-transitive relation. I'm telling you that diachronic identity is a non-transitive relation. Unless you think it is, then I'd be interested to see how the fuck you're ever gonna argue for that. But
I mean, it depends. Like when you say non-transitive relation, because this is what I remember you said. You said according to any kind of like conception for diachronic identity, it's gonna be it's understood usually as a non-transitive relation, right? Is that what you're saying?
or sorry, I actually mixed that up. It's the other way around. So it is a transitive identity relation, but your view is going to be committed to saying that it's a non-transitive identity relation.
Yeah. I mean, it's gonna depend though. Like I mean, it depends because what I understand by diachronic identity is that I believe that like when you talk about the diachronic, you're just all what you're saying is that it's some sort of like a thin logical relation, right? Like so you're basically you just are like
What I'm not
I mean
asking. What are you talking? Look, are you
no,
confused on the
what
question?
no what I'm trying to say is that all I'm trying to say is that like a diachronic ownership, right, or diachronic identity as you call it, is not metaphysically fundamental or like it is not
Bruh,
some.
you are confused on the question, DRV. What do you think I'm asking you?
You're saying that should show. Look, this is literally what you said, right? You're saying that um
Why do you
when you
insist on talking about these high-level philosophy topics when you don't know high-level philosophy?
no, you what you literally talked about like well that's what you said at first, but you were saying that like how do I get around the issue with respect to the fact that like when you look at the way psychological facts work, or that I'm fixing that in terms of psychological facts, how do I deal with the fact that personal identity entails the possibility of a diachronic violation, right?
Well, what I'm saying is specifically, how do you address the fact, barring all the other issues that I already explained with your view in the beginning, how do you address the fact that there's a possibility of a diachronic violation of the relation that you were describing previously, considering the fact that under ordinary conceptions of diachronic identity, they're going to be treated as transitive relations, right? So, like, just take a standard teletransporter case, for example, where, like, on the view, right, when you're on this, like, other planet, this Mars, that when the device scans your body, for example, right? Let's say that it scans your body, it tells you all the information about your body. The information is transmitted onto this other planet that this other body that you have is on, right? Now, simultaneously, while your body is on Earth and it's being like deconstructed, the exact same copy of your body is also simultaneously being created on this other planet, right? And we also know that the body which is created on that planet is non-numerically physically continuous with your former body. So these cases illustrate an issue of diachronic violation. How do you get around that?
I mean, sure. I could just point to non. Well, I could just point to non. Like the best thing I will just talk about is like when you look at the way diachronic ownership works, it seems to me that there are certain types of mental facts, right? So like first of all I'm going to say is that like there are certain types of mental facts that exist, or there are certain kinds of mental states that exist across time, and it seems to me that when you look at the way this psychological relation is working, it is not saying that like this particular identity is based on some sort of like all what it's trying to say is that like
Which part of my question are you answering?
um you're talking about issues in which you can illustrate an issue of diachronic violation, right? And how do I get around that without positing some sort of like psychological state or whatever?
Exactly. So you explaining to me like what your conception of diachronic ownership is not something which is going to illustrate the issue with diachronic violation. That's just you merely giving me a description of what you think diachronic ownership is or phenomenal ownership. That's fine. I don't really care about your accounts of diachronic ownership. What I'm asking you specifically is how do you address the issue of the non-transitive identity problem?
I mean, under a reduction, it depends on the view, right? Like for a reductionist, they'll just say something like, yeah,
Reductionist?
um, yeah,
You are a reductionist. Okay, wait, hold on a second. So this what type of reduction are you performing?
yeah. I'm just giving it like, well, okay, say like a naturalist, but like, I'm saying that like these particular facts are all down to natural facts, basically. So I would just say something
What
like
facts? The facts about identity are like reducible down to physical facts or what?
I mean, sure. I mean, I was just, it's not, I mean, yeah, like, because I believe, under my
What's
view,
going to be the argument for that? What type of reduction is that?
it's
Is it
just
like an
going to,
analytic reduction, synthetic reduction, phenomenological reduction? What type of reduction is it?
I think it's going to be some sort of synthetic reduction.
It's going to be synthetic reduction. So, okay. So again, what are going to be the synthetic? What's going to be a synthetic relation that obtains between the value facts and the physical facts, or excuse me, the facts about identity? Sorry, and the physical facts.
I mean, sure. I mean, I just don't think that when you're talking about the difference is that I just think that psychological continuity is not the same as numerical identity, right? So I'll just say something like,
Obviously.
yeah, but so I'll just say something like, diachronic identity can, well, it's really hard one to defend, but I do think that like diachronic identity can fail uh, even if you cannot, even if you cannot posit any kind of like extra fact. The main problem here is that like I don't value anything that is beyond the psychological continuity. So that's why I was talking about like reductionism. I do believe that the facts or the state of affairs in which I'm dealing with are with the psychological states. So I am not positing anything above the psychological facts, like some sort of soul or primitive ego or any kind of thing. I'm just saying that like these psychological facts are what can explain the data much more precisely, right?
Again, you just asserting that they are things which explain the data is not evidence that it actually is explaining the data. There's three problems right now with your view currently as it sits. The first is that your view is an accommodation. It's not actually an explanation of the data. The second is that you have the non-transitive identity issue. The third is that um, you're not able to illustrate or point out the synthetic reduction that you're performing on the facts about identity and the facts about like and the physical facts, right? Like it's not clear to me that unless of course you have like some like prior background metaphysics where you just assume that all like the natural world is like fully exhaustive or like our natural sciences are fully exhaustive, in which case I would reject that. I obviously don't think that that's the case, but I can very clearly identify non-physical objects. For example, Santa Claus has an identity, Superman. These things have identities, but yet they're not made up of any physical parts. So it doesn't seem to me like there's going to be some type of like connection between being physical and having an identity. Why would I believe that?
I mean, I think the problem is just that like I think it's impossible for you to posit some sort of identity relation without you talking about whether there is some sort of like, can you say, if I say something like there is no further fact of being the subject beyond physical psychological facts, right? Is there any substantive way of you talking about what these particular kinds of facts are or the commitments to these kinds of facts without invoking some sort of robust metaphysical explanation? Or that, I mean,
Is
because
there any way
like,
to account for what facts? Facts about identity?
no, I'm talking about the psychological continuity with respect to diachronic ownership, right? When you're talking about the
No, the
evaluative.
point is that we're just going to reject that as a whole. We don't actually think that the
You're
physical.
not tracking, not tracking. I'm saying that when you look at the evaluative state, it seems to me that it seems to me that at T1, it seems to me that at T1 and at T2, there are two different kinds of processes occurring there. And it seems to me that this particular qualia of what it feels like for something to be harmed or what it feels like for something to be an experience seems to me that they are diachronic in nature, right?
Yeah,
I'm
that's great. That's great that it seems to you that way, but I obviously don't share those same seemings. Nevertheless, I don't actually think
I'm
seemings
not
like
talking.
act as justifiers in the
I
first
don't care
place.
about your commitments. No, no, I don't
I'm
care about
not
your
talking about
commitments.
my commitments. I'm talking about the fact that you just said that it seems to you that way, and that's the thing that you're offering up as a
I'm talking about
justifier
your
for the
commitments,
claim.
not the
But I just
evaluative.
don't have those seemings.
So do you think that the evaluative, okay, so do you think that there's no kind of evaluation that is done when you look at the way some sort of mental fact from T1 to T2 transmits? Or
No,
do
I'm
you
not
think
saying there's no evaluation. What I'm saying is that the fact that that thing is the same over time is not in virtue of the evaluation that we are performing upon it as a matter of its psychology. That's what I'm saying to you. Like the fact that you and I can like evaluate over whether or not something like sustains the same psychology over time is not what makes it the same thing over time. Why the fuck would I think that? Why would I think my psychological evaluations are what make Rancho the same person over time? Because I can figure out if Rancho had the same memories when he was a kid. That means Rancho is the same person over time. Obviously, fucking not. Like, why? I don't know why people are even convinced by these views. These are complete dog shit views. If you translate this into the real world, nobody thinks this way. Nobody looks at a person and thinks, as a result of my evaluating their psychological attitudes, that is what makes them the same person over time. That's idiotic.
okay, so it's kind of funny because when you look at the way comatose situations works, or when you look at the way sleep condition works, right? It seems to me that like what an identity is for, or like the kinds of persistent facts that maintain someone's identity, it seems to me that like these kinds of facts that, because I'm not saying specifically that is the psychological evaluation that makes you the person, but it seems to
You're
me
saying
that,
that it's the psychological facts.
yeah, but I'm saying that the psychological facts obtain, right? The
Okay,
psychological facts,
so it's for a person in a coma, what are the psychological relations that are persisting through the coma?
wait, sorry, what?
For the person who is in the coma, what is it that's remaining the same in terms of their psychology before and after the coma?
I mean, it depends on the kind of. I mean, it depends on the kind of view you want to take, right? Like someone like me, I do
I'm
believe.
asking about your view, obviously.
Yeah. So like, it just depends. Like for someone, I mean, it depends on the kind of like structures, right? Like, so
Structures. If I fall into a coma today and I wake up tomorrow, what made me the same person yesterday as I am today?
I
Or
mean,
today and tomorrow, I mean.
yeah, it's gonna be the dispositional facts of like it's gonna be the dispositional facts about that person,
Dispositional facts. And what are those, what grounds those dispositions?
such as the learned skills of the person, or such as the
What grounds the dispositions?
what grounds the dispositions is going to be the, I mean, it's going to be the psychological profile of the person.
Okay, so again, you just walked right into it for a fourth time, DRV. That is that literally strictly entails vacuous circularity, because um the facts which are going to be explaining the fact that I am the same person over time is going to be a matter of a psychological fact, i.e., the fact that there's some psychological relation which obtains at T1 to T2, and when and you're or excuse me, a disposition to have those things, excuse me. And when I ask you what explains or grounds those dispositions, you just appeal right back to the psychology. So your view is not explanatory, it's metaphysically defective. It does not offer up an actual explanation. It just merely accommodates for the data because of the fact that we have like data of people who are actually fallen into comas. So your view does not make any genuine predictions.
I mean, it
That's
does,
been my
but
point the whole
when you
time.
look at when you look at the way the person is in the comatose state, it seems to me that there is some sort of psychological organization of the person. So
Oh my
that is
God, bro.
why, yeah, sure. But when people go to sleep, or when you're like under anesthesia, or when you're knocked, when you're unconscious, right? It's very similar to those kinds of cases, right? But what is I'm not saying that the psychological continuity is the experience itself. I'm saying that the psychological organization can explain why these particular kinds of states can be reorganized or can be restructured. Seemingly, when the person wakes up, like what keeps the person or what keeps the person persistent over time is a psychological organization of the kinds of like mental states the person
Bro,
has.
DRV. I'm gonna make this very, very simple. Okay. For example, if somebody says that the reason why value internalism is true is as a matter of semantic necessity on the way they're defining agency, and if their definition of agency is something which strictly entails that if there were to be an agent, that they would necessarily value properties in the internalist sense, that wouldn't be an explanation, right? That would be a view which is vacuously true. It's true, and there is some mild piece of evidence for it, but it's something which is almost negligible because of the fact that it's trivial, it's metaphysically defective, it's empty, right? That's kind of like what you're doing here. You're saying that it's just merely a matter of like definitional necessity that if there were to be an agent, then they would necessarily have a certain type of psychology, and that psychology is going to be what explains their diachronic identity over time. But again, what I'm asking you, what goes before the dispositions themselves, the dispositions that you're appealing to ground the identity facts, is something which is explained in terms of psychological identity. So it doesn't really matter how much you go into detail about your view. Any set of reasons which you're going to be able to offer up is something which is going to already presume the truth about your fundamental thesis.
Okay, but the problem is also that like I don't want to think that you're bad fake here, but when I say that when I'm saying that this particular dispositional states, or when I'm saying that I'm inferring to them or I'm trying to use them, I am not saying that like obviously I'm not saying that like the particular psychological states themselves is what I'm appealing to, right? Like I remember
Okay,
what I said earlier. I said that I'm using the psychological states as an explanatory role. So like it's not that it's a theoretical reduction or a theoretical it's a theoretical explanation, right? So
look,
I'm not
DRV, what I'm trying to explain to you, you're not engaging with anything that I'm saying, right? What I'm trying to explain to you specifically is you're taking on a view, right? Where under the view, you're going to be understanding identity facts to be something which is not necessarily an objective feature of the world, but instead it's going to be a fact which is determined on the basis of whether or not something has a specific psychology, i.e., a psychological disposition, right? So now what I'm asking you is there's going to be a few questions that I can ask you from there. The first one that I asked you was if it's logically necessary. You didn't demonstrate that to be the case. If it's something which is merely a matter of conceptual necessity,
I
if it's
said it's
just,
theoretically necessary. I said it's theoretical. When I
yeah,
said
but that doesn't
metaphysical,
answer the question about whether or not it's logically possible again, right? So now if you're saying that it's something which is conceptually necessary, i.e., it's just necessary by definition, then that's just going to be trivial. That's going to entail a non novel prediction, which makes it an accommodation, like I said previously. If you're saying that it's something which is metaphysically necessary, then I would expect you to have some deeper like explanation of why this mechanism of identity is something which occurs in every possible world where psychological agents
Dude, do
exist.
you know the difference? Okay, do you know the difference between an explanandum and an explanans? Do you know the difference between explanandum and explanans? What I am positing is
Yes,
what I am posing is that the identity is the explanandum. So like I'm not saying that this particular identity is the final by is a product, is the explanandum of
I
the
know
my
you're saying that, and I'm telling you that it's not. So you can't just reassert that it explains when I'm telling you that it's not explanatory.
what
And
are you
I've
not
given
getting?
you an argument for why it's not explanatory. I've given you an
Yeah,
argument several
yeah,
times.
sure, but like this is what my view is saying. All I'm saying is that at time t, system with psychological fact one. At time two, there exists a system with psychological fact two. S2 stands in the right continue of relations to S1. So those relations, right, is what makes it to say this particular person exists.
Yeah.
That is the explanandum of the fact. You're
What
saying
do you
that
think,
at T1.
again, so do we have to go over what an explanation is for you? Again, I've already explained to you what an explanation is previously. An explanation is going to be understood in terms of whether or not some hypothesis is able to make a trivial expectation, or if it has trivial predictions, right? Now, your view does not do that. Your view does not have trivial predictions. You're saying this is what your view is saying. I agree, that's what your view is saying. But your view is saying something trivial because your view is just simply defined. The only reason why you need to have a psychology in order for it to be the case that it's meaningful for us to talk about you, like harm being something which is applicable to you. The only reason why you're even able to say that is precisely because you presume that harm is something which is grounded in psychological dispositions, right? So if when I'm asking you what goes before the psychological dispositions, you're not able to engage with that part of the conversation because you understand there's nothing there left. You don't have anything more past that, which is precisely why your view is non-explanatory. You don't have anything else to offer up besides just restating the things that you're presuming to be the case. Like for
So if I,
example, what grounds the necessity, for example, on your view of identity facts being indispensable to psychological dispositions? Can you answer that?
yeah, neural organization, functional architecture,
Exactly.
physical continuity of systems, but they are
Exactly.
not. Yeah, sure, but they are not presupposing personal identity. They are
And I'm
not
not saying they're presupposing personal identity. I'm saying that your view is merely just defining these like identity questions. You're defining the identity just merely in terms of like what you like. Look, the fact that you can't provide a grounding relation between like for the indispensability condition that you're putting forth for psychological dispositions and diachronic identity, the fact that you can't explain that and like provide us with a grounding relation is evidence for the fact that your view has no grounding explanation.
dude, dude, if my view was some sort of like visually circular or something, it would have been something like X persists because X persists, or this person persists because they are the
That's
same.
precisely what you are saying, dude. In this
It's not
case,
like
X. I'll
I'm
tell you. I'll
giving
tell
you
you how you're
an
saying that.
okay, sure, go on.
So X in this case would be a psychological subject with psychological dispositions. So you are essentially saying there exists some psychological subject X which persists in virtue of their psychological dispositions. That's going to be vacuously true. That's non-informative. Like, why would anybody give a shit about that? You're not telling us anything
I am
informative. You're
not
not telling us
talking
anything
about the psych.
substantive.
Okay, this is not tracking shit. I'm not talking about the psychological structures themselves. I'm talking about the relations that stand. The relation of T1 and T2. They stand. They're continuous relations that stand with respect to.
Relations require grounding explanations. Genius. Do you ever like, but when you get done debating me, do you ever go to read philosophy? Like, what are you saying, dude?
Yeah,
In order for there
sure.
to be a relation, there has to be a grounded explanation. That's what relations are.
But okay, so I'm giving you hold on. I'm giving you an overall hyperstructure of how this particular system persists. I'm talking about how this particular system or this identity is the explanandum itself. It's not the like it's not the explanand, so it's not like some sort of like
I'm
fundamental.
not
I'm
saying
not
that it's the
I am not
explanans.
begging the question of what identity is. I'm posing to you fundamental, metaphysical, or even theoretical posits of how say this some sort of identity is being conceived, how these particular relations of identity, how they are
Understood?
how they are individually how they are individually conceived within a particular system, and how the particular relations that arise from these particular structures, how it defines something, right? I'm not saying that this particular
Okay,
structure.
so then you're just so you're self-admittedly just giving us you're embarking on this psychological project. You're not even talking about metaphysics. This is a psychology project. You're saying that my view is just offering up an explanation of the facts about their psychology and the facts about their neurology and how the facts about their neurology pertains to their psychology. That's not metaphysics. You're
Of
just
course,
talking
it's
about
not.
psychology.
Of course, it's not metaphysics. I'm giving you a theoretical explanation of why I think identity, or why I think what are the kind of conditions in which I ground some sort of persistence, or of like what I.
Exactly. My point is that you're not providing any grounded explanation. You're just merely giving us a description of the psychological facts. You're giving us a description of the neurological facts. And then you're just simply asserting the claim that identity arises from a combination of these two things without actually demonstrating any independent motivation for why it would, aside from assuming that those identity facts are specifically grounded in those neurological facts. That's my whole point, DRV. How many times do I have to I've explained this in several different ways, my guy. Again, you keep saying that there's these set of facts, right? There's the neurological facts, and then you give us like all these irrelevant details about them, and then you talk about the psychological facts, and you give us more irrelevant details about them. In your case, you're talking about diachronic identity, etc. And then you just assert that identity arises from these things. And then when I ask you, why is it the case that identity arises from these things? Your response is something like, because identity is grounded in those things. Do you see how that's problematic?
I don't think it's problematic at all.
Yo, oh my God. Rancho, are you here? Rancho, unmute your mic if you're here. Oh my God, Rancho's selling. I was gonna ask him if he sees the problem. Like, I don't know how you're not seeing. Does anybody else understand the very obvious issue here? Like, how many more times can I explain this to you? Maybe somebody
I
else can
do
explain
want to
this to
flag
you.
that DRV just said that he does not see an issue with circular reasoning.
Wait, maybe you can explain it to DRV because he's not seeing what it is that I'm saying to him. Somebody else can try to explain it to you, and hopefully, maybe we'll pick up the conversation after that.
Yeah, it is problematic.
I
Well,
mean, I'll just
let me
I'll
try to
just
explain it one more time, DRV. Okay, so just to make super clear, here's what the current issue that I'm saying is. We have a bunch of different like things at play. The first thing is neurological facts, right? The fetus develops X neurological pathways at X week in gestation. That's going to be understood as an empirical fact. And then you also have these other facts that you're appealing to, which are psychological facts. So once the neurological facts are in place, that gives rise to these new set of facts, the psychological facts. And what you're saying is that that then gives rise to these other set of facts, which is that this thing actually now has an identity. We can actually call this thing a person. We can say they're the same person over time, but only if the neurology and the psychology is present, right? And what I'm telling you is why. And you say, because the identity is just going to be fixed by those things. Okay, you're not actually providing any independent motivation for why that's the case. You're just merely asserting that to be the case while you keep restating those empirical facts.
Yeah, but the problem is that I'm not. Oh, let me just make this clear. It is a constitutive identity claim. I'm not using the psychology. I'm not inferring psychology as a grounding explanation. I'm saying that it is a very good example is when you look at the way um like a very good example is how we differentiate between determinables and determinates, right? If I talk about something is like a good example, if I say what is a triangle, it's because it has three sides, right? Or what is a dollar bill, it has some sort of like institutional role, whatever. I am not saying that this particular thing is this, that. I'm talking about the constitutive claims of what makes that thing an identity. So what it is to be X, right, is different from what fixes the application of the concept of X. So like it's a constitutive identity claim. I'm not using the psychology. I'm not inferring psychology as a grounding explanation. It's constitutive. So like you thinking that I'm begging the question by positing that psychological facts or the already psychological facts work is begging the question. It's not going to be fair because it seems to me that when you're explaining some sort of data, it seems to me that there's a certain kind of specificity in which you can reference the data, right? Like I'm just using the concept of diachronic identity and psychological facts to posit that these are constitutive claims of how identity persists over time. I'm not saying that it's necessarily a grounding.
Wait, sorry. Is the
What
new
is
claim now
Google
that
Gabble?
is the new claim that psychology is constitutive of personal identity slash personhood? Because that's obviously false. like psychology, I don't even know what it would mean to say that psychology is a constitutive relation, because psychology is usually understand to be something which is like derivative, right? So usually when you talk about psychology, it's going to presuppose that there's a like some type of mental subject for whom the psychology can belong to, right? So psychological facts are going to pertain to facts about an already existing agent who already has beliefs, who already has intentions, who already has desires, who already has attitudes. So it can't be constitutive because it like a mental subject is logically prior to a psychology. So
This is
what the hell does it even mean
this
to
is
say
the
that it's
most
constitutive?
dude, I'm literally getting triggered right now, dude. I'm not saying that identity is
Yeah, please
produced by
get triggered,
psychological
please.
side. I'm saying that identity just consists in relations holding. That's all I'm saying. There are certain kinds of relations that exist with respect to some sort of psychological states.
They
I'm using
consist in
that
relations holding.
identity just consists in certain relations holding of each other. So if you when you just ask that,
And
why
that's the
does
claim and that's the claim that's constitutive.
yes, because this
Okay, what does
particular
it mean to say that? Do you understand what constitutive relations are?
constitutive relation, you're just talking about what fixes the application of the concept. That's what it's all about.
No. You're not talking about a concept. You're talking about a real world fact. You're talking about people, not the concept of a person.
I'm saying that when you're talking about a constitutive identity claim, you're talking about the specificity, right, of the particular kinds of
No,
construct.
again, you're not just, this is not just merely a conceptual claim. This is a metaphysical claim on the status of people. So it can't just be a matter of, it's merely a matter of conceptual
It
necessity.
is doing
You fall into
theoretical
the
work.
other horn of
Um,
the issue with you just saying something trivial. If
the,
you're
the,
making a
it's
stronger
not
claim on the
trivial.
actual
Hold
metaphysical
on.
status of
How
people,
is it
you would
trivial?
need a
Hold on.
deeper account.
How is it trivial if I am using as a because what I'm saying is that the constitutive claim here is doing the theoretical work, right?
You don't understand. In order for you to say something is constitutive, it's a
It
constitutive
does the
relation,
theoretical work.
in the
Yeah,
stronger metaphysical sense, you would have to demonstrate how there's facts which pertain to this thing, without which that thing could not be what it is. That's what it means to be constitutive. Now, there's going to be a different sense of constitutive relations if you're talking about it in the conceptual sense. Now, of course, I understand there are things which are like constitutive of concepts, but then we're not just merely talking about like concepts here. We're talking about like the actual metaphysical status of real people, you and I, what makes us people in the actual world. We're not just merely talking about the abstraction of what a person is. So your account of constitutivity is not even something which is sufficient to ground the metaphysical claim that you're making on the status of personhood. In order for you to demonstrate that, you would have to give a deeper account, which actually explains the fact that we are people in the real world because of this thing that you're saying.
I mean, sure, but if someone says that an identity arises from using psychological facts as a metaphysical relation, right, and saying that these kinds of things explain normativity or explain some sort of like framework, right?
Explain
I
some
have,
sort of framework? What are you talking
yeah, I'm
about?
talking about like the problem is that I'm using psychology as a metaphysical dependence relation for grounding identity,
Look, let me
right?
ask you a question. If I say it's constitutive of water, that it's H2O, do you think that's merely a conceptual necessity? Or is it also a fact about the real world?
It's a synthetic claim, so it's going to be some sort of it's a synthetic claim. It's
It's a
supposed to,
synthetic
right?
claim. It's not a synthetic claim on my view. It's going to be an a priori synthetic claim, not just merely a synthetic claim on my view. But moving that aside, do you agree that it's constitutive of water that, or I'll give you another example. It's constitutive of Socrates that he's part of the male species. Do you think that that's just merely a conceptual truth, or is it also a truth about the world and the way Socrates actually was?
I
Yeah,
mean,
constitutivity is actually a word, Astromonk, in case you didn't know.
yeah, sure. But the problem is that like the problem is that when I say that like when I say that it is because in this particular case the UCP is both a conceptual necessity and a fact about the real world. So
Okay,
In
so
this,
how is it a fact about the real world that our identities aren't necessarily fixed by our psychology and our neurologies? You're gonna say because it's conceptually necessary.
no, it is a metaphysical fact about the world that
Okay,
relations.
so what's the what is the metaphysical account, right? That's gonna supply you with justification to say that it's like metaphysically explain like this view is something which is actually providing a metaphysical explanation.
Yeah, it's the fact that in the real world, psychological relations satisfy conditions for like
Oh
existence.
my gosh.
It's a fact of the
So
real
again,
world.
you're going back to just reasserting the very thing that I'm placing into question. How many more times are we going to do this? Like
No,
again, like
no, 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 no. Before even
not only is it not a real
even
world fact.
hold on. Before even positing the psychology, when we look at the way relations work, right? The only relations that usually play a persistence role for existence, like psychological or functional relations, like this kinds of relations exist, right? Even if you're someone who denies that there's some sort of like grand role for this particular kind of things. I am simply saying
What?
that it is a yes, and I'm simply saying that it is an empirical fact about the world that it seems to be that there are relations that play a persistence role for beings, right? Like psychological functional relations as they exist in the brain. It is
Look,
a real
if
fact
you're
about the
saying
brain.
that we observe in the world, look,
It is
let me
doing
just kind of shift through the jargon. If you're saying that we observe in the world that there are psychological subjects and those psychological subjects persist, I agree with you. What I don't agree with you on is that the fact that their psychology persists is what makes them a person.
let me just
So
make this
all
clear.
you're doing here is just demonstrating and you're
Do
just
you
go
do you
ahead.
agree that okay? Do you think that it is conceptually necessary that identity requires some sort of relation?
Yeah. Not a psychological one though. That's not a matter of conceptual necessity. It could be some other type of relation. For example, on my view, it's going to be a metaphysical relation. It's not going to be a psychological relation. I don't actually think we're people in virtue of our psychology. I think there's a deeper, more fundamental metaphysical fact which makes us people.
So if you believe that um, it is conceptually necessary that identity requires some sort of relation, how
I
does it?
don't believe that.
You said it doesn't necessarily have to be psychological. You usually said
Oh
that it.
yes, yes. My bad. Apologies. I thought you said psychological relation. Yes, I do believe that.
I said relation in general. I'm not trying to
Why are you
specify.
laughing? Like
No, yeah, nothing. It's not like
this guy's
I'm not
trying to
like
posture
I'm
off
not like
like
you
the
that I'm not like
slightest mistake in
W
the entirety
tone
of the
check.
debate. Like
I'm not like you that you like just spur guard on like users every single minute. But anyway, what I'm gonna say is like you do believe that yes, it is conceptually necessary that when we talk about identity, you're referring to some sort of relation, right?
if you're talking about identity in the sense that identity is going to be understood as a transitive relation.
Exactly. So you do so it is going to be a contingent fact, a real fact, an empirical fact that psychological relations, right, are those that usually play a role for human beings, right, or for us, right? When you talk about identity, it is a contingent fact. That is why I said here that like
No.
without collapsing, hold on, without collapsing your metaphysics, right, into an indeterminate structure in which you cannot really place the particular kinds of relations with respect to some sort of like contingent fact or some sort of contingent necessity that does the
Why would I
effect
agree that this is an empirical fact?
because any other kind of metaphysical relation that you want to use to explain an identity that
Hmm.
is not going to infer to some sort of contingent fact like psychological relations,
Hmm.
right? It's gonna be it's just gonna
Wait,
be
so
question.
the fact that you're a person is only contingently true?
No, I'm saying that like any other kind of relation that is trying to use any kind of non-psychological or non-contingent, let's not even say psychological, any kind of non-contingent fact about the world to explain some sort of like explanatory role for how this particular transitive relations for identity works, right? It's not really going to answer any of your questions because you are still using an
What's the
indeterminate.
argument for that?
Yeah, because it seems to me that when you are it seems to me that when you are using facts, or it seems to me that when you look at the way conceptual necessity works, it seems to me that
Seems
like
to you?
no, not seems. It is the fact that we use determinate facts about the world when you are measuring let's say data. When you talk about, let's say, a shape, if somebody says that I believe that shapes are certain two-dimensional structures, it doesn't tell us anything about the world. But if somebody says that a triangle is a shape with three sides, it adds more specificity. And it's
Again, I'm not
in the
disagreeing with this idea. Like you're just saying, again, all you're saying is that like us being able to identify the quiddity of objects, i.e., the essential features about objects, is going to be something which is like helpful for our communication. Yeah, I agree, obviously. Like it's helpful that we know that there are like these joint necessary and sufficient conditions which make something a triangle, and that's something which we can very easily distinguish from non-triangles. I agree with you, but this does not engage with my question. You're saying that it's somehow an empirical fact that it's constitutive of like our personal identity and personhood, that an indispensable condition for that relation is that one must have a psychology, right? Or like a certain type of neurology. And I'm asking you, why is that the case? So do you have a non-question begging argument for that claim? It's not gonna be something which is metaphysically necessary, because you haven't illustrated any metaphysical account for why that's the case. It's only going to be something at best which is conceptually necessary. But then again, that just again puts you in the camp of you just mentioning something trivial, in the same way that the internalists, specifically in the sense that projectivists are talking about, the one that I laid to you previously, is also making a trivial claim on the conditions for like value, right? So there's no distinction between you and that type of like value internalist. That's my whole point.
Okay, so let's just make this clear. So there's not
How
so
much
there's
longer, DRV, bro? This shit is killing me, dude.
Like, dude, how I don't know. I
Go
don't even know
ask
what he's
ChatGPT,
responding to,
bro.
man. Like,
Yeah, it's
I
like
don't know
DRV,
either.
what
Shit
what
is so.
even what even are you responding to, brother? Like, I've dismantled your point in so many different ways. I don't even know what you're even responding to at this point.
gives me a headache.
my main point
Genuinely.
you are still trying to posit that my claim does not give any substance. It doesn't give any robust kind of like commitment, right? Because all it does is giving a conceptual framework. I don't disagree that it is a conceptual framework, a conceptual explanatory framework, but I am using that particular framework to posit that I am much more committed to that than you, because I believe that this particular kind of commitments are in relation to contingent facts about the world and empirical evidence, empirical data, right?
That's
It's not
fine. Like, look, this. What does this do? You're just telling me the reasons why you believe this view more than I do. Like, obviously. What are you even saying, dude? Like, obviously, you're going to have more reasons why you have this belief than I do, because I think your belief is false. I don't actually think that we are people because we have a certain set of psychological facts, or that we have a certain type of neurological structure. I don't think that's what makes us people. Like, for example, not only is it the case, and also I forgot to add this. This just came to my mind as I was thinking about that for a second. I forgot to mention previously. Not only is it the case that your view is just merely like an accommodation and not actually something which is able to generate like trivial, or excuse me, non-trivial expectations if the hypothesis is true, but it's also the case that we have evidence against your view. For example, look at the fission cases, look at fusion cases, look at teletransporter cases. How do you explain these cases where seemingly identity persists without psychological relations? That's evidence against your view. So the fact that those cases exist is at least something which confirms the hypothesis that it's not the case that identity is constitutive of a certain type of neurology or psychology. Unless you can diffuse the cases, unless you can diffuse the fission case, unless you can diffuse the fusion case, or unless you can diffuse the teletransporter cases, then it's evidence against your view. Wait, by the way, do you even know what those cases are? Do you know what the fission and fusion cases are?
no, I've not read on that.
Oh my god, bro. You gotta keep up. We've been talking about this shit like since last year, my guy. Fission cases. You
I
gotta
have
catch up, brother.